In this video, I wanted to bring you guys to the range and go over procedures that you can use for practicing and training with your MDC firearm. And I say MDC because I actually have two firearms that I will carry. So one will be a single stack, very slim and light, like the MP Shield. You know, the other one I would recommend is the Hellcat, but I don't have one yet. But the MP Shield is what I have at the moment. So I train with that. It's just something that I'm going to carry most of the time, most of the year. But I do have a firearm, the M&P 2.0 40 compact, you know, the 4-inch model, and that's what I would use if I'm going to go into an area that is further away from the house, or likelihood of, you know, dealing with multiple threats or something like that. But for day-to-day stuff, generally I'm not putting myself in harm's way intentionally. And, you know, going to the grocery store, just carry your firearm, always a silent guardian. So that's what we want to prepare the most for in a logical manner. And realistically, the bigger the gun is, the less likely you are to actually put it on every day. And, you know, with the way I dress typically when I'm trying to look nice, like going on dates or whatever, I'm not going to sit there and dress, you know, in something that'll basically allow a big firearm, because it'll just be looking odd and out of place. So anyways, the first thing I wanted to touch on was the firearm that you're going to be working with, because that's very important. Not to be thinking, oh, working with an outside the waistband, something that's unrealistic for your application, because I see a lot of people going to training courses thinking they're practicing for concealed carry, and they're not even working with a concealment holster for concealment. They're not working with inside the waistband or anything like that. And yeah, it starts off downhill basically from there. But as far as the practice goes, the first thing that I want to talk about is there's specific drills, drills that you can actually work on, more of evaluation that your dry fire is working. But I've touched on these drills before, and I'm just going to demonstrate their implementation on the range. So things like your trigger skills, your fingers straighten off the trigger as if you're presenting the firearm and you're seeing a threat, but your fingers straighten off the trigger until you're ready to fire, or there's an intent to pull the trigger. And then, you know, maybe for a follow-on shot, you're thinking at any time now you're going to have to put on a follow-on shot, so your fingers on the trigger. These are specific drills that you want to be able, you're practicing or verifying that you're capable of pulling the trigger without moving the gun too much, because you may move it a little bit, but you're trying to really take away a lot of that movement and make it more efficient, because you should be capable of doing that, right? Your first trigger pull shouldn't be too dramatic, right, off course, because some people say double actions, you're getting off course a lot, it's too hard to pull, but the pull is typically during the extension. Same with the striker fired gun, but the rate of pull and the point at which you start the pull is going to be a little bit different. So the next one is draw from concealment. I understand a lot of people are working with a static range. You may or may not be able to conduct draws from concealment, but one thing you can work on is compression and stuff like that, but I'm not really going to cover that today. However, that can be useful, but it's pretty much the same as, you know, your trigger drill. Basically, straighten off the trigger, your finger being straightened off the trigger and pulling, and you can incorporate that instead of the draw if you're on a static range that doesn't allow you to do that. It's just a way to kind of supplement a little bit, kind of pick up the spare, so to speak, and work on the draw in your own time. Now, some other thing, if you have the opportunity, at least dry, would be to work on cover and movement from cover to cover if you're capable. And you can do things around your house or whatever, work from standing to kneeling, you know, cover that'll require that. You may or may not, most likely you're not going to have the opportunity to work on that on the range, especially when you're in a stall or whatever. So, you know, I understand that that might be, you know, a problem. But one thing you might be able to do is work with low light. Work on low light positions, like with the light and doing transitions from here to here or whatever, or here to here, doing transitions, one-handed to, you know, partial two-hand support, stuff like that. Not something that I'm going to work on right now because I still got a few months before I even have to worry about darkness, really, here in Alaska. The next one, and probably one of the most important one, is malfunctions, because a lot of people have this misconception that they need to stick with a certain old school doctrine, for instance, a type 1, a failure to fire. They think that automatically you need to tap it no matter what. If you put a few rounds through it already, that means that you put a few rounds through it. Obviously the magazine is secure, but there was a failure to fire, and it's probably an ammunition or light strike problem. So ammunition or gun problem. So that doesn't typically require a rack. That's not a magazine issue. That is a ammunition or gun problem, so you need to just rack it out of there. There's an understanding of the evaluation process, understanding what's wrong. That does require cognitive input, and from there, a reaction from analysis of the symptoms is very important, and being reasonable. A lot of people would say, well, the tap is just insurance. Nothing is free. Everything costs something. Press checks cost something, and everything else. Everything builds on something, and a lot of it can be bad. So be mindful of that. So, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and start with my demonstration and kind of demonstrating these core fundamentals of basically being able to work with your everyday carry firearm. Now, first things first, really quickly, I'm going to be working with a target on cardboard this big. This is about the size of your vitals. Now, of course, I can always dial this down a little bit smaller to where it's basically an A zone. Now, you can cover this entire A zone. You don't need to worry about putting one hole inside of another. Number one, it's a little unrealistic, and next thing is you want to create as much damage in a wide area as possible. Now, I could say I want this whole entire area affected, and that's absolutely fine, but I'm trying to work on A zone concentration. So that's one of the things I recommend, is not being too hard on yourself, because you're not grouping, the size of a nickel. So anyways, that's what I'm going to be working with at first. So I'll go ahead and get that all set up and load my magazines and get going on this demonstration. Okay, so I'm relatively close to the target, about 3 to 5 yards away. Mosquitoes are everywhere, coming out to make love to my blood. So anyways, I'm going to be working on trigger straighten off the finger straighten off the trigger first, and then have my finger on and trying to pull the trigger as fast as I can without moving the gun. So I'm not too worried about a widespread necessarily, but that doesn't mean I'm going to compromise my grip, right? So basically give myself a little bit of leeway, understanding that more of an area affected is better at getting chances of rupturing support structures, arteries, blood vessels, that kind of thing. So anyways, here we go. Okay, so that was 5 rounds. I had one that was basically at the top right here, and that's fine. That's still within my area. I kind of pulled it prematurely, and my grip wasn't exactly right on, so I got to work on that. So anyways, let's go, and I'm going to have to perform a reload at the end of this, because I only got 3 rounds left, right? Okay, so my third round or second round was basically below the target. That's unacceptable. I basically overcorrected for the recoil. But anyways, did the reload. Not really wearing pants that I would normally wear, so kind of a struggle getting the magazine out, but whatever. So anyways, last 5 rounds. Okay, so that was actually okay. I actually held a relatively tight group on that one, so no big deal. It was kind of a moderate grip. Wasn't exactly vicing it down as much. Being a 9mm, I'm used to shooting a 40 and having to apply a little bit of a corrective twitch, so to speak. Corrective jerk, because that's just one of the techniques when you're handling a firearm that gives a little bit more recoil to implement more control. You can't just apply a grip without having a corrective kind of twitch, so to speak. So anyways, next one's going to be finger on the trigger. Okay, that was an okay group, kind of a vertical climb. Went below where my point of aim it was, and a little bit above it. My grip slipped, kind of slippery grip right now, so need to require that good grip. So concentrate on that. Good grip. Do it again. Okay, so one of the things I want to go ahead and talk about is how I'm actually aiming, and that is basically target focus, and I'm superimposing my aligned sights. A lot of people are like, well, I can't really have fine aiming. You're not looking for fine aiming, you're doing area. You're doing effective area, basically, and this isn't necessarily point shooting where you're not using the sights at all. You're superimposing them. So just like holding your thumb out in front of somebody or pointing at them and using your finger to kind of aim, just like this, like pointing at my nose. I don't need to look at my finger to point at my own nose with this camera. I can actually align it, even though my view screen is right here and the camera is right here. So I can look at the camera and put my thumb up, just like covering the moon with your thumb, like on Apollo 13 or whatever. That was nerdy. Alright, back to it. So the more I do it, the better I'm able to get my good corrective twitch, so to speak, and get back on target. And so I'm holding a pretty good group, so it's good group, but I would actually like to see that group open up a little bit. As you can see, it's pretty well spread out even for this close of a distance, but that's not a big deal. You want to actually be able to affect a bigger area. So the next thing I'm going to work on is the draw. Last thing I'm going to demonstrate is the draw, and the technique here is basically following up with my finger straight off the trigger and extending out, and basically putting off 5 shots. So I'm incorporating the 2 different types of trigger control that I worked on. So basically initiating with finger straight off the trigger, and then follow-on shots are obviously initiated with finger on the trigger and ready. So the important thing is to evaluate the target between shots, because this is where efficiency comes in, where you're not just spraying a certain amount of rounds. So we don't do double taps or anything. That was just a method of saving ammo and money for people. So if you're following that, you're kind of behind the curve as far as being educated on what to do. So anyways, you can work with 5 rounds each. It's a good test of how you're able to manage the recoil and get you a good pattern, just like I've displayed here. My patterns weren't exactly that great until the end of my my drills, so to speak. So anyways, I could perform this more, but not going to really waste your time on camera. So anyways, to the draw. So that was a good 5-round string. I was a little bit high and right, but I was still within the area that I wanted to be in. So next one is going to be about 6 rounds, because I got to do the reload, and I'm going to put 3 rounds in afterwards. That's a good minimum, I think. Anyways, here we go. Okay, so I let off my first shot a little bit early from the draw, and that's absolutely realistic. Is you want to shoot sooner, and depending on your draw technique, you can let off the shot about here. And typically, by human nature, with adrenaline and stuff like that, when you're actually under threat, you're trying to combine acts. So no matter how much you drill it, kind of unrealistic to ask yourself to do robotic, stuff. You're going to try to combine things, so get used to that. Nothing wrong with that, but make sure your body can actually perform that effectively without being a liability, i.e. missing. The thing with 9mm is that once you dealt with something like 40 or whatever, 9mm becomes really a puppy dog, so I'm not really spreading out my shots all that much because of how fast I'm shooting. I instinctively grip the gun a lot more, because the faster I'm trying to shoot, the more grip I'm applying, and I don't really necessarily have much more than a little more than a cosmetic grip, as I would call it, for my support hand, and that's not necessarily good, but that's just what ends up happening. So it's basically just this one grip, this one hand that's doing most of the controlling for the follow-on shots, and I'm shooting a little faster than I would like to, but I'm still keeping an eye on the target as I'm doing that. But you're limited on rounds, so you need to have accountability of that. So I know some people say slow it down, but I'm trying to do it as naturally as I can. So let's look at the end result on the target. So here we go. That's basically what the target looks like now at the end. As you see right here, I got the top shot here. That was my first string, and that was kind of unacceptable for me. It's a little too close to the outside, but it's still within tolerance of my general field of aim, which is basically this area right here. So you can see this was basically from the draw. Very instinctive shooting basically, but I'm still superimposing my target, or superimposing my sights on the target, which was basically, it looked like that, having my sights aligned right at the middle of the target. So I did pretty good there. So pretty good group for the distance, and I'm pretty sure it'll bring it back a little bit more, and it will cover a good amount of the target. But yeah, with that said, that's basically me going to the range and practicing these basic skills and drills for getting down the basics. And this is stuff that you can reactively do once you've confirmed that there is a target and you need to initiate the reactive functions to save your life, such as pulling the trigger without moving the gun from the draw, or basically already presented. So anyways, with that said, I appreciate you guys watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have mosquitoes in your area, kill 5 of them. 5 a day. Keep some mosquitoes away. So anyways, thanks a lot. Leave a comment below, and you guys have a good one.